shaking me! Let me go!
Get up. Get up. Get up. Brunch is a time for friends and mimosas, not debates on morality.
The Saints Row series is one of gaming's most outlandish and funny barrels of nonsense. They're not perfect games, mind you. You still got some shallow, repetitive missions and some wonky game design choices, but you can still have a lot of fun playing them even today, and they also go on sale for like $3 every other month on Steam, so that's a good deal. People who have played these games love them so much that the series was able to coexist with Grand Theft Auto. That is insane. The last Saints Row game before this one was 4, and a lot of people don't like that one, but I mean, I thought it was fun. But in the 9 years since it came out, the open world game has evolved at an alarming rate. Metal Gear Solid 5 is one of the few open world games where the open world structure actually services the gameplay, allowing for much more open and dynamic solutions for its many missions. Breath of the Wild, it shoves you out the door and says you're on your own, and presents you with a world that constantly prods your imagination and curiosity without the need for a bunch of waypoints and markers and Ubisoft tier copy-paste missions. Cyberpunk 2077. Elden Ring was a lot like Breath of the Wild, an entirely self-directed adventure that is dropping to its knees, begging you to explore every inch of its ginormous map, rewarding you with amazing weapons and items and boss fights that you'll be telling your grandchildren about. This genre has redefined itself numerous times since the last Saints Row, but it has also become heavily saturated, where it feels like every second and third game that comes out these days is an open world game. And it's gotten to the point where it's not even special anymore. Open world games are the new FPS, and in the midst of all that, games like Saints Row and even GTA for that matter are starting to show their age in many respects, at least from the standpoint of gameplay. Now, my absolute Alice in Wonderland fantasy was that the new Saints Row would be just good enough to hold me until GTA 6 comes out. And unless GTA 6 comes out like next Thursday, this is not that good. But before I start roasting the game, I gotta pay some respect. This game actually comes with an amazing feature that allows the player to play a Saints Row game on a PC without it crashing every 3 minutes. In fact, I think it only hard crashed twice, but by Saints Row PC port standards, that's basically zero. Out of all of the things that one could reasonably expect from a game made in the current year, this is the one thing I did not expect them to actually get right. Graphically, this is the most dramatic jump between Saints Row titles. This isn't Naughty Dog level quadruple A graphical prestige, but it looks great, better than I expected it to look. My computer can't produce the absolute top of the line results, which is to be expected for a game this new, but it's still a noticeable jump. The destructibility of the environments do a great deal to make the world feel real and not like a plastic diorama. Lighting, models, and textures are a big leap from the previous games. Animations, not so much.
I signed a lot of shit. I didn't actually read it.
When Saints Row is at its best, it can actually look very nice, and it can be very cinematic at times. But it is worth noting that immersion can easily be broken by things like this, and also driving a cop car and having it despawn while you're driving it and having it throw you into the middle of the road. The impact sound when you shoot people is very satisfying. When you shoot a dude, he really feels shot. I mean, listen to this.
Down for the count.
Santo Ileso is much unlike Stillwater and Steelport, trading out the rustic urban environment for a desert oasis. Although it's pretty, it can kind of feel flat and underwhelming with buildings and structures that look important enough that you should be able to enter them, but you usually can't. It's probably not fair to compare this to Rockstar. It makes more sense to compare it to its own predecessors, and from that perspective, it's probably bigger in scale than the previous Saints Row maps. I read somewhere that they may expand the map map in the future, that would be a welcome move if it's true, but I would also be happy if instead of doing that, they just took the map that's already there and fleshed it out a little more with buildings that you can actually enter and aren't just there for show. The world is littered with collectibles in various places that just show up on the map whenever you get near them, so much like the previous games, you kinda just scan the world in a grid-like pattern until things pop up on radar and you go find them. In summary, this definitely is a modern open-world game. Like the previous titles, one of the biggest highlights of the game is the custom character, and they are definitely aware of that fact because they put out a free character creator demo months before they actually released the game. The customization options are very extensive, and it's certainly a dramatic step up from its predecessors. You can even customize the censorship by choosing between pixelation or random emojis. I tried to recreate my Liquid Charming persona from the previous games, but really he looks more like Bill Maher's long-lost cousin. I was frankly devastated to learn that Liquid Charming's iconic British accent is no longer an option in the game. How could they do this to me? After all I've done, they take away Liquid Charming. They betrayed me. I gave them my money and they ripped it into a billion pieces.
Kill all those motherfuckers!
The new voice actors are good in their own ways. From what I understand, the directors allowed them some wiggle room for improvisation to bring their own spice to their version of the boss, which adds a little more personality to the characters. I have a soft spot for this more democratic style of direction. I'm glad to know it wasn't just my way or the highway crap. I settled on this Western voice. It can't replace Liquid Charming, but it's a good stand-in. And since he's a cowboy, I've decided to call him Charming Ocelot. Now, I've been following this game for a while, and while there was some gameplay showed off, I noticed a very clear pattern of focus on pretty much everything besides the gameplay. And I suspect that is because there is very little that is new or creative here. Not to mention it is definitely lacking in polish, but I'm gonna get there in a minute. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing something you've already done before. I mean, to what end can you really say even your own favorite piece of media is entirely original? Everything is influenced by a multitude of things in ways that you might not even realize at first. Remember, I'm the guy who wants a true sequel to Thousand Year Door because I don't think that formula has exhausted its potential yet, and it has room for improvement. But when doing something that's been done a lot before, the key is to either do it as well as you possibly can, or at least give it some kind of unique spice to differentiate it, which is why even people who hate JRPGs will often gravitate towards Earthbound or Undertale because you don't have a lame-ass magical sword. Okay, well this guy does, but the point is Saints Row mechanically really isn't any better at what it's doing than its contemporaries, and if anything, it's honestly worse. This wouldn't be the end of the world, except that games like this are everywhere now. It is staying true to the old Saints Row gameplay loop, but this is a new video game in a series that hasn't had an entry in 8 years, so you would like to see a little more in the way of innovations. You do have this hang glider move, which I think was an attempt to bring back the Matrix Superman flying crap from Saints Hose the 4th, but without sacrificing the thematic direction of the game. When it's working properly, Saints Row is still good for a little bit of goofy, dumb fun, and I am insanely thankful that they remembered to include the insurance fraud minigame. There are some cool mechanics to try and keep things fresh, like this blue psychic energy thing that lets you shoot through walls like Cyberpunk. Green Goblin's surfboard is pretty neat, but when all is said and done, you could probably get as much gameplay value from the previous games that have already been out for years, and they're also a lot cheaper, and you don't have to download the Epic Games launcher either. They're all on Steam. They're like $7 or something. Like, they go on sale like every other week. The difficulty is weird. You have 5 preset difficulties, but you also have individual adjustable sliders for everything. Even though I'm not usually a fan of selectable difficulties, I'm hesitant to call this a bad thing on the grounds that it's an idea that you don't see very often. And for a lot of people, this is going to be a nice option, and to be honest, it's kind of a necessary thing for this game. I played this on the boss preset, which is the hardest one, and honestly, it sometimes feels like it wasn't even playtested. The game will still be disproportionately punishing for mistakes that are next to impossible to avoid. The challenges presented by the game can be so inconsistent that you can't even formulate a strategy in your head, like this stupid shit where sometimes cops kill you in a split second from full health, or sometimes they do a little sliver of damage, or sometimes killing them gets your health back, or sometimes it doesn't and you die. Sometimes getting your car tapped does nothing, sometimes it takes away half its health bar in a split second, but at the same time, the AI is somehow so brain dead that sometimes they just stand around doing nothing and wait for you to headshot them. I had one mission where I was supposed to destroy a bunch of cars, so I go in with an RPG, and then after about a minute of blowing up cars, I realized that none of the enemies were reacting to it at all. I mean, this guy's literally just casually strolling around amidst a bunch of fiery explosions. Something as simple as standing on high ground or using the sniper rifle often makes them incapable of winning. But then there's the car chase missions where they can just drive through other vehicles without even slowing down, and if you get out and destroy the cars with a rocket or something, it just instantaneously spawns more, like 3 seconds behind you. I had this mission where whenever it started, the helicopter driver would just drop out of the sky and I'd land on the ground and I couldn't even do the mission. And when I tried to come back to it later, the guy wasn't even there. But I could still run into him as if he was there, but his model was just gone. I had another one where I had to get into a helicopter to steal a cop car, and when I entered the helicopter, the camera completely broke and the mission was unplayable. There was this mission where I had to escape notoriety from the Marshall defense contractor, and I drove back to the church and my notoriety went away and the mission kinda just refused to progress. There are these threat missions that'll say defeat enemies when what they really mean is destroy cars, and then when you start destroying them, the game will just randomly forget that you destroyed them for no reason and make you start from zero. One time I started a mission and my character was just frozen in place and I couldn't move, and after about a minute I realized that the game didn't even let me pause and shut it down properly, so I had to close it from Task Manager. Whether the game is screwing you over with weird bugs or nonsensical abrupt difficulty, or it's rolling over like a docile puppy, it just doesn't understand how to properly respond to the player. It's so riddled with bugs and wonky design choices and back-to-back broken shit that it ends up feeling like a game from the 2000s, except even those games usually function on their own terms. The older Saints Row titles often had a lot of these exact same problems, but to play the first Saints Row game in almost 10 years just to find out firsthand that the series hasn't really improved its ancient design flaws since 2006, and somehow actually got worse, it feels like a serious punch in the gut. And in a game with a fraction of the charm and sass of the older titles that came out almost a decade after the last mainline game, it just isn't capable of getting away with it. And then there's the story.
What sort of waffle maker can I get for 35 bucks?
Presumably one that makes fucking waffles?
This is a completely rebooted story, so none of the characters from the previous games make a comeback. There are vague references to previous titles, like I think one of the gun descriptions references Johnny Gat, and they reference the Altor Corporation from the second game in one of the tourist guides, but for all intents and purposes, this game is the reset button. This is a new continuity, and these characters have no relation to the Stillwater Saints. The story actually does start out pretty promising, almost like it's going to tap into Saints 2 levels of seriousness. The premise is that you're a member of the Marshall PMC and you're really good at killing people, but you get fired after a failed protection job even though you were the only one who actually accomplished anything, and you and the crew have no money to buy a working toaster, so they start a new street gang called the Saints and slowly overtake the city from the Idols, Panteros, and the Marshall defense contractor. Where the old games took notes from GTA, this game almost feels more like it wants to be cyberpunk a lot of the time. I mean, you got the desert setting, you got pink neon goons that can do this, you got excellent stability, and even some of the combat music sounds like cyberpunk. The new characters are neat in their own ways, but I feel like they're not developed as well as they should be for the kind of story that they seem to want to tell. And they are definitely not what old-timey Saints would expect. Johnny Gat would take these dudes' lunch money and get freckle bitches all around. Or, sorry, FBs. Yeah, it's like KFC. We know what it is. I've been following this game on and off since I saw the trailer at Gamescom last year, so I had some idea that this was going to happen, but there were also some mixed messages from the developers, where they said they wanted to rebalance the comedic and serious tone they had in Saints 2, while also saying that the older games were products of their time that should basically stay there. It definitely doesn't feel like Saints Row 2, and I really don't see how it balanced comedic and seriousness at all. Even when it's trying to be serious, which, let's be honest, is like one time, it still feels comedic. Something the game is really weird about is how sentimental and cute the characters are with each other.
You'll kick just as much ass on the side hustles, I know it.
It's only natural for characters in this kind of game to be playful at times, but to get attached to a story like this in any meaningful way, it requires a level of much needed aggression and stakes and conflict that just isn't there until the very end, and even then, it's just barely there. Remember, these guys are all lunatic murderers. That's something no amount of fake-ass Gen Z dialogue is ever going to sanitize.
This is gonna be an epic statement. That yacht's guarded AF.
Dude, did you just say AF?
Yeah, it's an abbreviation.
First, we fucking swear all the time. Second, it's only an abbreviation when you text. AF. As fuck. Same number of syllables, dumbass.
They try to reach for some moral questions near the end to get the boss to reflect on their behavior, but the build up to that was basically non-existent and the payoff was very weak. There really aren't any consequences or repercussions, even if it pretends that there will be. There are genuinely cute moments and some occasionally funny scenes hidden somewhere in there. It wouldn't be fair to deny the game that, considering I've been roasting it for 15 minutes, but it just isn't enough to satisfy an entire 30-hour adventure. And that's the saddest part of all. I'm probably one of the very few people who actually thinks the story could have been good, but it just underdelivered in too many ways. Saints Row is one of the most frustrating games I've played in my life. It's a game that could have been great, but it just isn't. If you want to dismiss that as nostalgia blindness or being too harsh, that's fine, but I don't think it's unreasonable to want a game in a series to be more faithful to its roots, let alone function properly or even be a good game on its own terms. I cannot remember the last time I felt this defeated by a video game. The most charitable verdict I can give it is that if you like the previous games purely for the gameplay, you'll probably enjoy this one too if you can put up with the insane bugs. But even then, should you buy it? No. Not yet. If the previous games are any indication, this game will get a price drop eventually. I'd wait for that to happen, especially considering they'll hopefully be patching some of the broken garbage. Of course, that's not a guarantee. Like I said before, the previous games are still absolutely terrible on PC, but it's not impossible. You might enjoy this game if you have no attachment to the old games and you're not burnt out by the modern open world formula, but in spite of its occasional fun moments, Saints Row often felt like the default product that would result from telling an AI to make a modern AAA open world game. This game made me very sad. But it also taught me something valuable. This is a game that plays it as safe as possible by being the kind of game it is in the current video game landscape, and for that, it kinda hurts itself. The lesson here is that you should branch out and take chances on weird stuff that isn't like the things you've already played 3 billion times. I gotta start playing some goofy JRPGs or some racing sims or even point-and-click adventures and shit. I keep talking about how I should open my mind and broaden my horizons, but this was the last straw for my closed-minded attitude, and for that, I am thankful to Saints Row. Like, it's literally so ass that it made me grow as a person.